continuing part 2 of our visit to Ashwapati and the yoga of the soul's release. Page 27.
Yes, page 27. So we see some very interesting changes, transmutations that Ashwapati is going through. And one of them is liberation of the inner senses from the clutch of the outer. In fact, originally even senses are born in the supramental consciousness. Shubinda speaks about the supramental sense. Now, in the supramental sense, everything is held together in an all-comprehending oneness. But our senses have separate objects. They can focus on one thing, not on other, and they have to shift attention, and it's very difficult because we live in a very separative and divided consciousness. And our senses are tuned to only physical objects, physical harmonies, or rather physical sounds, physical shapes, and that too within a small range. Physical tastes, there are so many things which we cannot, taste, smell, hear, see. But then, when these senses are liberated because of the inner change in yoga, because of the pressure of the divine Shakti, the divine mother, they begin to open up and a new world begins to open before us. And
hearing, seeing,
taste,
audience,
everything. And this part of freedom from ignorance is sometimes described in yogic literature and has been much misunderstood in tradition. For example, there is a concept of tasting Amrit, tasting the nectar of immortality. So now, because it's a whole yoga, you can't taste it like that. So there are two ways people have devised to bypass the whole yogic effort. One is in Hatha Yoga, they try to do a particular posture by which the tongue is touching the palate, is drawn inside, and they taste something and they say it's Amrit. And the second one is where, even more simpler, they go to a place which is, like in Amritsar Golden Temple, you have a pond. A pond means water body. And they go there and taste it and they say, now, we have tasted Amrit. But the real transmutation of the taste, even that Shubinda describes. Touch. So, how the mother would touch an object and know its origin. Through touch, she could reach out to the owner. Shubinda says a yogi can touch a sword and know the impressions which are within it, what it has been used for hundreds of years back. So to that extent, these inner senses can awaken. And part of that is described here, only a part, a magical accord, quickened and attuned to ethereal symphonies, the old earthy strings. So there is a world of music which cannot be heard by the gross ear. And that is the music which the yogi experiences through an inner listening and brings it out, or an inner inspiration and brings it out and gives to the world. So first we saw the change in mind and the heart. It becomes vast, and then the hearing. It raised the servitors of mind and life to be happy partners in the soul's response. Tissue and nerve were turned to sensitive chords, records of luster and ecstasy. It made the body's means, the spirit's acolytes. So that's how the change takes place. Right now these senses also have the same duality like the inner being. Under the grip of ego and ignorance, we classify things as good and bad, pleasant, unpleasant. But when these senses begin to open up, everything, that touch of beauty, that touch of delight, because originally the senses are meant to convey the pure delight, the rhythm, the secret rhythm, which is hidden behind everything. But the surface consciousness is constantly in agitation, turbulence, distorted. So this tunement brings out that. And it brings out not only within oneself, it helps to bring out in another person. Few more, I'll just turn the page and read some more changes. On page 28, he heard the secret voice, the word that knows. Look at this line. A whole world.
Everything in that.
Everything in that. The mantra came to the seers. The word that knows. And it is there in the higher worlds. But we do not know. So our words are simply expressions of material objects or simple psychological states that we experience. But when one begins to experience these deeper states, there are words which correspond to that. They correspond to deeper truths, higher truths. But the moment they enter into the human mind, it distorts it. So when a divine being says, or a being living in the higher consciousness says, we must love all, human beings invariably misinterpret it to mean vital love. Or when he says, everybody, the brotherhood. But when it comes into the human mind, it changes its meaning. So that is the unfortunate part. But these words, which the word which like a mantra descends from above. Look how, Sri Aurobindo speaks of Vande Mataram, or the lines which some poets in their exalted moments, the mystic poets, not every poet, because the poetic inspiration is different from the mantric inspiration. So that word which knows, which in one single, maybe a magical formula conjures a whole world. For instance, there is a simple mantra, and Sri Aurobindo speaks of that. He writes also that some places, Om Tat Sat. That's it. Very simple. Soham Asmi. Now, it's a word that knows, I am that. So, these mantras, how did the Rishi conceive of it? It was not through a mental process. Now, of course, we are fortunate to receive it because they are printed. But the Rishis had no such access, but they had access to the inner book, the inner Veda. And I think that's what is important. And saw the secret phase that is our own. The inner planes uncovered their crystal doors. Strange powers and influences touched his life. A vision came of higher realms than ours. A consciousness of brighter fields and skies. Of beings less circumscribed than brief-lived men. And subtler bodies than these passing frames. Objects to find for a material grasp. So you see, every part is undergoing a change. So we take this example. Sometimes people, when they are sitting in meditation or in a certain state, they feel love for the divine, or they feel as if the mother touched their head. And people ask Sri Aurobindo, is this a true experience or is it imagination? Sri Aurobindo says, good Lord, these are the early experiences that come. If you start thinking that they are imaginations, then you will stop there. They will stop coming. Now, what is that heart which feels love for someone we have never seen physically? I'm sure quite a few of us have not physically seen the mother. So why do we feel love? Normally, to feel love for somebody, conventional science tells us we should have a proximity. And there should be a lot of interchanges, or at least there is a love at first sight. So at least the sight is involved. But here one is physically not seen, and there is love. Where does that love come from? And where do these experiences come that as if the mother touched me? The people who have this experience. It's an immaterial sense which experiences this. because these are things which we cannot experience with our gross senses. Even fevers and such things can be sensed. Mother speaks of it. You can feel it here. You can feel the organisms. So these are other side of it. Objects too fine for a material grasp. When nuclear explosion took place, mother could smell it from so far. And she said it's not good, it's going to disturb the earth atmosphere. She could literally smell it. We don't know. We think, oh, it's too far, it's not going to affect us. And joys that never flowed through mortal limbs, and lovelier scenes than earth's and happier lives. A consciousness of beauty and of bliss, in knowledge which became what it perceived, replaced the separated sense and heart, and drew all nature into its embrace. And then you see these three lines which we were just speaking of. Air glowed and teemed with marvelous shapes and hues. So, what could not only see but smell? There are smells which come out from our psychological movements, which people with a sensitive nose can smell. For instance, it is said that when one went near Shri Aurobindo, one felt the lotus fragrance, very subtle, it's a very gentle fragrance. And I know of somebody whose experience of Shri Aurobindo's presence is by the smell of the lotus. Not people feel in different ways. The peace, the inner strength, security, knowledge pouring in. As you said, more and more identified with Shri Aurobindo. But I know of somebody who smells Shri Aurobindo. So these open up. I know another place where there was a lady who had lived a life of real, true inner purity. Not the moral purity, but opening to the divine, the true purity. And near her there was a subtle fragrance of jasmine, the flower of purity. So you see, there are various kind of smells. The reverse is also true. On the other side also, Shri Aurobindo at one place says, the dirtiest smell is the smell of sex. Saying those words. Human beings enjoy it. But its smell to the divine it's something, it attracts forces of a different order. So there is a whole science waiting to be discovered, which the new being with the new consciousness will discover and lay bare before man.
And
In
now-
the nostrils,
Yes.
yeah.
He goes through all the different
Yes,
senses.
in the nostrils quivered celestial fragrances. So, we have this at a physical level, lighting a dhup, an agarbatti, an incense. Now that's because it's a symbol of something else, a true inner experience. Similarly, the gong, the bell in the churches or temples, they are symbols of inner experiences which the yogis experienced or glimpsed. For the new being, it will be a natural experience, but when the veil is torn, they experience these things.
Even as a young child, in the churches, the frankincense was known to me.
Yes.
And then I come to India, and the
Yes.
frankincense is here.
So we have so many, shankha, that conch shell. So all these sounds and these smells and this play of forms, they were drawn from a vision of the higher worlds, which yogis glimpsed, but obviously it was not embodied. It did not change or transmute our nature, but in exalted states one could glimpse. That also will be shown that Ashwapati glimpses it, comes back, glimpses it, comes back, till finally the whole thing changes into the integer of the soul. On the tongue lingered the honey of paradise. So the taste buds change. You were talking about that. A channel of universal harmony. Hearing was a stream of magic audience. A bed for occult sounds earth cannot hear.
Even earth cannot
Earth
hear.
cannot hear. The earth nature which we have embodied, we cannot hear.
Yes.
the humming sounds which come from deeper layers, the sound of the flute, only in an entranced state. And people wrote to Sri Aurobindo these experiences. There are whole yogas which focus on one such aspect and go further and further.
For the briefest instant, when I was younger, I heard the music of the spheres.
Yes.
And I've not found any music like that.
And I'm sure the mother saw it. That's why she asked you to bring down that music. Because she doesn't go by outer things. So you may say, Mother, I don't know. But she knows. She knows that this child of mine has an opening, has an experience. And she uses that capacity and develops it. So, and then how it comes to a culmination, that's something very beautiful. Page 31, these are very, very powerful lines. Last 4 lines. The Supreme's gaze looked out through human eyes and saw all things and creatures as itself. In one of his poems, The One Self, Sri Aurobindo ends with these wonderful lines. My rival's downfall is my own disgrace. Yes. I look at my enemy and see Krishna's face. So, what that vision is.
Yes.
And knew all thought and word as its own voice. There, unity is too close for search and clasp. And love is a yearning of the one for the one. It's no more two beings. The mother says love's come from the divine and goes back to the divine in the other person.
Yes.
So, suddenly the personalities which have become merely instruments, they are simply reenacting a play which is going on in the depths.
And she has named 2 roses. One love from the divine,
Yes.
and one love for the divine.
Yes, absolutely. And beauty is a sweet difference of the same, and oneness is the soul of multitude. There all the truths unite in a single truth, and all ideas rejoin reality. I think there is one passage with which we can end for today. Maybe it'd be very nice if you could read it. Page 32. The last 5 lines starts with a vast unanimity and it ends with his soul stood free, a witness and a king. And in fact, he abode at rest in indivisible time.
Okay.
Yeah, a vast unanimity.
A vast unanimity ended life's debate. The war of thoughts that fathers the universe, the clash of forces struggling to prevail, in the tremendous shock that lights a star, as in the building of a grain of dust.
Look at this vision.
The grooves that turn their dumb ellipse in space, plowed by the seeking of the world's desire. The long regurgitations of time's flood,
Going back and forth in an endless cycle.
the torment, edging the dire force of lust, that wakes kinetic in earth's dullard slime, and carves a personality out of mud. The sorrow by which nature's hunger is fed, the estrus which creates with fire of pain.
Look at every line, it's so marvelous. The sorrow by which nature's hunger is fed. Otherwise, we would be so content with our life and never learn to move beyond the initial start.
The fate that punishes virtue with defeat. The tragedy that destroys long happiness, the weeping of love, the quarrel of the gods ceased in a truth which lives in its own light. His soul stood free, a witness and a king, absorbed no more in the moment-ridden flux, where mind incessantly drifts as on a raft, hurried from phenomenon to phenomenon. He abode at rest in indivisible time.
So, when we read this, we just wonder that Ashwapati has already achieved everything
Yes.
that one can imagine. So, what more? What else is left for him to realize, achieve, and do? And that is that part of the story which unfolds itself.
Yes.
So, we'll stop here and